Right. All right, Tina. Good afternoon, Tina. Good morning, still, Jill.
Hello.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah. And we're gonna wait for Sevi to come on, but in the
I'm
meantime,
here. I'm
oh,
here.
you are?
It won't let me undo my video. It says the host is controlling my video.
Ah, okay.
Start my video. There we go.
There we go. Welcome, Steve.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this session. I hope you caught a glimpse of the first session here earlier. But wait, before I introduce us and get going with the conversation, I just want to welcome everyone for our second session of our Palooza, our fourth Activity Strong Summit. And as a reminder, Link Senior started Activity Strong in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And just quick reminders in terms of housekeeping is that for this summit today, we can all earn up to 6 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and NCCDPC credits. To earn the credits, just attend the session, 1 up to 6. Obviously, fill out the survey no later than Friday, June 30th. And then we'll process these for you, and you should get them by July 7th, the latest, after the holiday weekend. If you have any questions, please send them away to webinars@linksenior.com. As a reminder, we're using Zoom. I hope you all know what Zoom's about, but you can use both the chat and the Q&A feature. If you do use the chat as a reminder for everyone to see your contribution, just make sure you select everyone. So, I am really excited about this one. So our second session is about the C-level leadership to enable the purpose of resident engagement. And before I give the opportunity to our amazing speakers to introduce themselves, I wanted to share a little bit, kind of a couple of thoughts about why we feel so strongly about this, this panel. So obviously, we're a little biased, but we believe that activities is amazing and essential for senior living. That piece, we're not biased. We truly believe it. And the reason why including leadership in these discussions is that I personally, and many people believe that true leaders are enablers, right? And the 3 panelists today have clearly demonstrated that beyond creating and setting a vision for their organizations, they are also amazing at making it happen through this idea of enablement. Some people talk about servant leadership, but it's the idea of making things happen. And the reason why that is so important, and that's actually one of the things that we're going to be discussing today, is there's sometimes misunderstanding between what CEO or C-level people do and what we can expect from them. And probably the best way to explain it is when you walk into some communities, sometimes there's just a kind of magical sense of what's happening. There's a culture, there's something in the air. And I want to share, Tina, I hope that's okay, but I visited Tina's community not too long ago, and this is what was on her door, right? So when you walk into Tina's community, there's just this different vibe that you don't get in all communities, right? So Tina, I hope that's okay that I share this with the audience. I did notice the Old People Cool sticker, so cool with that. But just the fact that it's the kind of community you just want to stick around a little bit more, right? So our panel today, very excited to introduce Sevi, Tina, and Jill. And so what I'm going to start off by doing is allowing them to introduce themselves. So Sevi, if you want to take it away, just share a little bit more about you, your organization, and after that, we'll go to Tina and Jill. Thanks so much.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for doing this. This is just super cool. And I think, again, like you mentioned, Charles, is one of the things that can sometimes get overlooked, and I know everybody feels like is probably, you know, not as important on the budget, but it is. It's very important. So I'm Sevi Petra, CEO and co-founder of Priority Life Care. Looks like I've got some PLC folks and some former PLC folks represented here, and I'm so glad that they were able to make the time to be on here. So we a lot of times focus on affordable and middle market senior housing. We have communities in, I think, 14 states to date, and we've been operating for the last 13 plus years. My background was in banking, so I'm a reformed banker, learned operations, and very grateful that we have so many amazing folks on our teams that have been very passionate about bringing different types of engagement from, and goes across the board, right? From not just our activities directors, but also from our maintenance departments to our dining, to our housekeeping, to have that engagement. There's lots and lots of creative ways to engage. And so I'm really excited to be here to talk to all of you. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sevi. Tina?
Good afternoon. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Sandry. I'm the CEO at Forest Hills of DC. We're a 134-year-old mission-based organization. So we do skilled assisted living and assisted living memory care services in the heart of Washington, DC. And I'm very excited, honored to be here today to talk about all the great things that our team does in our environment. And I totally agree with Sevi that this is the heart of what we do, right? So we're not handling an assembly line. We're handling people with souls and spirits, and so I just want to thank everyone for listening today, because it's just such a super important component of what we offer. And if there's anything, COVID did show us what happens when we don't have these types of activities. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks so much, Tina. Jill?
Hello, everyone. Thrilled to be here. Thank you, Charles and Tina and Sevi. I'm Jill Vitale-Yassam, President and CEO of Christian Living Communities. We are a 51-year-old nonprofit. We have 9 communities in Colorado, life plan communities, assisted living communities. So we support older adults in independent living, assisted living, memory support, skilled nursing, as well as adult day services.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Also, Charles, can I say, like, kudos for an all-female panel?
Thank you. It is very, sorry, I have goosebumps about you saying that. Thank you for acknowledging it. I'm a big fan of the work of the 3 of you, and it's just an honor to be able to enable that conversation. So thank you, Sevi. So let's talk about engagement a little bit. I can tell you that if I walk in one of your communities, it's going to be magical, like I said. But this does not happen overnight, and this certainly does not happen without hard work. So I'd love it if we could start just by explaining the model. So, we talked a bit about that idea of how we operationalize, and, how do you go about doing that, Sevi? Like, how does that work in your organization?
Just by, helping to create that culture and make that, those magical moments. Well, first of all, I can't like go on without like acknowledging all of the comments. I am like loving these. Everybody like cheers, ladies, going up. I mean, I think that like that's a greatest example is I think attitudes are caught, not taught. I think they're caught, not taught. And so I think that when you like lead by example and you come in with this energy and you come in with this, feeling of camaraderie, and you come in with an idea of collaboration, like everybody catches it, right? And the opposite can happen as well, right? If you come in with this like, downtrodden feeling and your eyes are rolling and you're kind of huffing and puffing, like that's the attitude too that you're bringing into the community. And we can never, ever, ever forget that, we're not just coming into the community. We're not just walking into an office. We're walking into people's homes. And that attitude that we bring in as a leader, all of you are leaders in your buildings. You're all leaders in your communities. And that is what everybody else is going to pick up on and feel. So even though we may be having a bit of a rough day, or, we're late getting out and spilled the coffee on, our nice bright white t-shirt, we kind of have to leave all that at the door, right? and remember that we're there not for ourselves, we're there to serve, and we're there to help bring something there. So I always try to just lead by example, and starting with having that, you know, positive attitude, and remembering that eyes are on me, and when how I react and the things I don't say are just as important as the things that I do say.
Thank you, Sevi. Tina, how does that work for you when you enter your community?
Well, I think it's exactly kind of what Sarah was saying with regards to attitude. Attitude matters, and our practice, our what we bring to the office, what we bring to the community, what we bring to the home, what we bring to our team members, make a difference in terms of the chemistry that people feel when they come into the buildings that we're in. And I think part of that is understanding that all departments are important, right? So historically, perhaps there may have been more communities that view like nursing or some of the clinical aspects of what we do within our care might matter more, maybe because historically that got more survey attention, or it required more financial resources, right? The clinical supports that are required financially for a nursing department are very different than a life enrichment department. And so by looking at those sort of sidebar aspects of those departments, historically there's been value placed with that. But I think we start to look at, in particular in the last 3 years, right, the value of mental health. What is the price tag that goes with that? Then we start to look at a model of care where it's much more holistically in a budget. It's much more holistically in who has voice at meetings. It's more holistic at who attends QAPI meetings or quality assurance, you know, efforts within the building. And it sort of flattens the opportunities for everyone to bring their best self to work. And that might include an idea for the life enrichment department to do a different type of music, do a different type of programming. I know somebody who knows a beauty pageant rodeo person who wants to come in. You know, these don't have to come in. The ideas can come in much more widely than from the life enrichment department, and that it's all part of our role, similar to in your own home, right? Friday nights are not just the purview of one person in your family deciding what are we going to do, right? It's everybody adds a little bit of spice to that, and so I really think this sort of flattened model, and then we have a great administrator who helps to coordinate those ideas across, and let's make sure that departments aren't walking on top of each other, so it can all happen.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks for acknowledging that Friday afternoon is not. I definitely have a little bit of that. But, you know, Jill, I know you have such a unique model in a good way, right? Like really forward thinking. I'm a big fan. I think I mentioned that to you. A big fan of your book. I've ordered it for a few people at least 10 times, and I highly recommend it. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about your model and that citizenship approach?
Sure. The first thing I want to say is that don't buy my book on Amazon because the price is too high. Go to Health Professions Press, because I think my book's great, but it's not worth what Amazon's charging. So save your money, go to the right place to buy it. Yeah, so in our organization, and this has really been a journey over time, and really an iterative process of really rethinking what we believe about what it means to be older, what it means to be older and living with dementia or living with frailty. And we have completely shifted away from this mindset of residents being customers or consumers, that we are here to serve and entertain and things like that, and really moving to a citizenship model. And that's really all about people having, and this is all evidence-based, right? That everyone, no matter what our abilities, has a need and an opportunity to play a meaningful role and have meaningful purpose in their lives, and work together to make our community stronger and better. And it is a shift like you've never seen. And, you know, Charles, when I really think about when you walk, I've always been like, what is it? I want to put a name on that feeling you get when you walk into a place, and it's real community. And a lot of, and I used to run communities and it said community on the sign out in front, but it wasn't a real community. It was a hotel, right? Where people were recipients of services and care, and we were just there to serve. And that's not what we need to live a long and healthy life. And that doesn't work well for team members either. So I'm excited about how it is evolving over time.
Thank you so much for sharing this. I would also add that from my personal experience reading your book 1.5 times, I didn't read it twice completely, but 1.5 times, it's also how you just make it personal in a good way, right? Like you are also thinking ahead of like the product that we all want to. And actually, I shouldn't say product, I should say community. So thank you so much for that, Jill. Actually, now that you've introduced yourself and your models, I would love us to maybe pause a little bit and talk about right now what we see as challenges, and then we can discuss about opportunities and potentially what we see as quote unquote the future. So back at you, Jill, you kind of alluded to that, but when we were preparing this discussion, we were thinking about ageism as kind of the most foundational thing to tackle. Would you mind sharing more on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think our biggest challenge to creating communities where people have meaningful purpose, where it's a vibrant opportunity to live and to continue to grow, is what we all believe about aging, right? We've been taught since we were toddlers that it's negative and it's all about decline and you don't have anything left to give. So it's us really rethinking that. And again, with ableism, what do we believe about people living with dementia? What do we believe about people living with frailty who need nursing home level of care? We've really got to push back against that. And then for the people that live in our communities, there's internalized ageism, right? So if I'm, 85 years old and I've been told my whole life, well, once you reach a certain age, there's nothing really left to give. It's really hard to start to shift toward a new way of thinking, but that I think is our biggest opportunity, is creating truly age positive environments for people. But it starts with us, because we all have beliefs in our heads that are not true. And so I think we have to do the work first and then start those conversations in our communities.
Thanks so much, Jill. Savi, taking this to the community level, what do you see? What do you encounter?
I think one of the biggest challenges right now is just the shift away, post-COVID, and how we approached activities and engagement during that time, and what it should and needs to look like, I think, going forward. So I think that, there wasn't a lot of entertainment because we couldn't have it. And then when things opened back up, the expectation is to have constant entertainment. And while entertainment, I think, is a very, very important part of what we do, it's an important part of us as humans. Like, we all love being entertained, but it's about finding ways to have engagement and connections with everybody and not just 75% of the people living there, right? So I think that while it is a challenge, I think that it also kind of coincides as an opportunity for us to try to think outside of the box. And we have this real shifting dynamic of who our, consumer and resident is and is becoming. And I think that's part of the challenges that we're starting to see, is that we have two very different consumers who want two very different things and have always seen things done a certain way. And we're trying to kind of have a one size fits all. And that's not really the way engagement works. That's not the way, all of us want. The challenge is, I think, identifying how we can make things much more individual and also have it be autonomous, so that it's not like a forced activity. It's not a forced engagement. It's not a forced entertainment.
Thanks, Savi. And, obviously this idea of shifting can be seen both ways, right? It can definitely be seen as a challenge per se, because things are changing, but with change, we also have opportunities. And so shifting now towards opportunities, Tina, as we were preparing, and as I often speak to you, you often are great at explaining how these shifts, these opportunities, are things for us to grab. And I think you have a story with your mother, but beyond that, what do you see there?
Well, just to piggyback on the last couple of comments with regards to the challenges of resident engagement and what our opportunities are right now. We certainly know the demands of person-centered care, and, not just for the 75%, but to include the 100%. how we get there. And I think one of our biggest challenges right now becomes the opportunity, right? Challenge and opportunity is the same word in Chinese in many ways. And so is the return of the volunteer workforce. You know, that is what extends our I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here on this webinar here today, but getting those folks back who basically dissolved because the older ones are afraid to come back in the buildings, the younger ones have found other volunteer sources, just getting the schools to commit to come and bring groups back again on a regular basis, for us has been a real challenge, and it's just kind of starting to open up again. And so getting to people to shift their attitudes and their expectations of what a COVID nursing home looks like and what's that opportunity right now looking like is, I think, something that we're all going to be grappling with. And I think you referenced my mother just historically as an Asian. We have a whole different view on aging, that it's actually a really good thing and they're very proud of it. In the Chinese culture, you have to be 60 to get your like real big birthday party. And it's akin to the quinceañera that's for in his Hispanic culture, or the sweet 16 in traditional Southern culture. And in China, it's 60. You got to be 60. So, you know, if we're talking about ageism, what is it like when somebody turns 80? What's it like when they turn 90? What's it like when they turn 100? What are our cultural expectations around that? It used to be years and years ago, you got a letter from the White House or Willard on TV when you turn 100, but we have so many centenarians now that we don't do that, right? And so I think it's the opportunity to look at what is the expectation, and we get that opportunity to be the culture change, because we take care of more elders than pretty much any industry. So if we can be that shift in expectation and let people understand what that is, and we'll talk about that more later, then we can shift some of that expectation.
Thanks, Tina. I don't think I can tell any of my kids today that they'll have to wait for the age of 60 to have a real birthday. Like I'm kind of, but these are amazing thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing them. I know that we were also going to be discussing the fact that it's not, I think we've already done a little bit of it, but the fact that it's engagement is not just the one person's role, but I do want to dwell that a little bit more because I'm such a believer in your model, Jill. So do you mind expanding that a little bit, and maybe explaining a little bit, how do you make it happen? I think that's a big question we have today. In the chat earlier, there was a team member that said that they were one activity director for, I think, 95 residents, and it's their job and no one else is helping. So how do you make it happen, Jill?
You know, I think one of the first things is really recognizing, Charles, when I've talked to you before, I think the activities profession needs a rebranding, right? When you really look at, when you look at the work that all of you do, and it's community building, right? It's community life. You are creating opportunities for people to have true belonging and relationship building, to have meaningful purpose in their lives, to continue growing and learning. And every single one of those things is proven through research to create better health outcomes and longer lives. And so I think as a field, we've just got to stop thinking that this is one little department and it's all about bingo, right? It's about way more than that. And it plays a critical role in our communities. It also plays a critical role in our, think about that, right? You are creating better health, longer, healthier lives. And that has a major impact like on our country and our healthcare system and expenses. So I think we've got to start honoring this role and really seeing that the magic comes when everybody sees their opportunity to be part of this, right? And when I've seen it work the best is every team member has passions that they can bring to work. And I think part of the challenge we face sometimes is I might not want to go help with this certain program, but you know what? I love art. And if you asked me, hey, would you mind sharing your passion and your skills with art with the residents? I'm going to say yes. So I think it's really looking at our team members, family members that have passions and talents out there that they could bring to the community, and residents, because it's not just being a recipient of things, it's the opportunity to give back. And every single person who's involved with your organization has passions and skills and gifts that they can bring. I think we just need to really focus on asking the right questions and moving that forward, like citizenship, right? We are all in this together.
Yeah. So Joe, I promised myself that if I see Sevi nodding more than 15 times, I will let her talk. So I'm just impatient to do that. Sevi, go right away. Thank you.
Well, I so agree. Jill, that is like my biggest thing is that everybody at the community level has to be involved in not just thinking, oh, it's just the marketing person's job to fill the building, and it's just the dietary's job to deliver the food, and it's just the housekeeping job to clean up, the floors. It just like in your home, like, while you may have something that you're assigned to do, it doesn't mean that you're not going to pitch in and help. This is exactly the same thing. And that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is that, especially when it comes to like saying, well, it's just activities does this. And then if for some reason that person has to leave for many reasons other than just they left to go to a different job, right? It becomes a challenge to re-engage some of those residents and get them back in because they liked the way Jill did it, or they liked the way Tina did it. And it's getting them up to trust again, right? And it's getting them to get reacquainted. Same thing in the dining room, right? Like somebody new comes in and sets the tables and doesn't put the Tabasco sauce on Mrs. Smith's table where it normally goes, and it's like a big uproar. And I think that everybody, when you notice those little things, those are the little things that make the difference and make your house feel like a home. And it's our jobs, I think, our responsibilities as community leaders to help instill that. While, yeah, this might be your job description, that doesn't mean that, we don't anticipate or expect that you're going to be jumping in. Same thing. I can guarantee you could ask Tina and Jill the same as me. If you walked into one of your communities today and you saw that there was like trash on the floor, you're going to go lean over and pick it up, right? You're not going to walk all the way over and get somebody, right? So it's just about, you would think it's kind of common sense that all of our departments would mesh in. And when they're smaller buildings, it's a little bit more expected because everybody wears more hats, and you may not even have department heads for these smaller buildings. You may have one department head for 3 departments, but I don't know why we sometimes have such a hard time with thinking outside of the silos.
Amen. Let's start there. Let's also, I'll just share with you, Sevi, and actually Joe also, I've known Tina for some time, and I count her as a friend, and it's an honor in many ways. And, she obviously, like you, exhibit a strong understanding and passion for engagement. And sometimes we've had several times with Tina, this discussion that, hey, Tina, like CEOs do blah, 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 and so on. And that behavior is different than what she does and what you all do. And sometimes I have to remind Tina that you, the 3 of you, are the unusual type of CEOs. And I think obviously this is changing. COVID accelerated things, but there is something to be said about not every organization truly believes about it. Not every decision maker, like you said, Sevi, is actually going to pause and going to pick up the scrap and so on. So, Tina always goes about the fact that it's about creating genuine relationships. And I've kind of set the stage. Tina, I'd love to. I've been talking about you. Do you mind sharing a little bit how you make that magic happen? Because it truly is magic.
I think part of creating genuine relationships within a team is making sure, number one, that people feel seen, heard, and are valued, right? So when we are comfortable with that, that's also the reason why people leave their jobs, right? So they want to be seen, heard, and valued. And so one of the things that we do is we do intentional communications training so that people have voice, so that we have some common language around what we do, right? COVID-19 gave us very common language around screening times and antigens and PPE and so forth. And within what we do in a community, to have that common language around expectations, around activities, around who's responsible for cleanup, setup, getting people, moving them, and that we have a helping community. This is not on me. This is the fact that we have a really great team who are willing to do not wait till they're being voluntold to do something, not waiting for someone to go, other duties assigned, this is for you, although you can joke about that. And on some days, when you have a great team, people do pick it up. But it's having that ability to share a real humanistic piece of yourself with the people that you're working with. Not only does it create great outcomes for our residents, it creates great satisfaction for our team members who are working in that space. And that doesn't happen by accident. It is the role of leadership, of the CEO, of the executive director, of the administrator, to get out there, look at what's going on between the departments, be the water that flows between those departments, foresee any challenges with regards to that. Is it all up to activities to create the volunteer base that's needed, or do we pull in HR? I go out and I speak at colleges and universities and I say, we need people. I go to my particular alumni associations and I say, we need people. I know that our department heads are pulling in people to support life enrichment with other folks. Our administrator brings her husband in to play music, or he takes pictures of events and things like that, right? So we have, and I think by doing that and perhaps sticking a little bit less to our strict job description and having more room for creativity that way, and saying, how can I really help you? Again, I go back to the family analogy, right? So you can do your role as like mother, father, child, and so forth, but it's those moments in between where we create those connections, where we step out of our role, maybe in a job, we just turn open our ears and we say, what can I do? Or we surprise somebody with a little extra support. There's 5 love languages. It works at work as well. So, you can Google and Megan can slap up the test for the 5 love languages. Go, if you have not done this with your teams, this would be the one takeaway I say you should do, is get your teams to take this love languages test. And you can know on a good day how you can support your team members, how you can ask for support from your team members, how you can deal with residents who are having a bad day. It's just a real simple tool to one of many that help create more positive relationships. So my background's in communications as well. And I would say that's the thing, is really focus on the communications. How do we think when we're under stress? How do we behave under stress versus normal times? And I'd say most of us are probably a little different when we're under high stress. And for team members, we have to really understand that from our perspective, and we have to see how the resident is when they're under super stressed circumstances. They're not going to behave the way that we see them on a different day, nor should our interventions be the same.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tina. Where you mentioned about like what happens between these events reminds me of one of the things that Jill, during our preparation, felt was so important, which is what happens between the schedule. Like this, we have the skeleton, but what happens in between that? Jill, do you mind just getting a little bit into that? That was really fascinating to me.
Yeah, if you think about your life, meaning doesn't happen. Like if you had your weekends, your days off scheduled from morning till night, I know I would hate that, right? Because meaning comes in between those scheduled events, and scheduled things are nice. Like I like to go to a concert sometimes, but real meaning comes from the day-to-day things that we do. And this goes back to that citizenship model of people having a meaningful role to play in the day-to-day. And I'm actually going to put a link in the chat box to a video so Claremont Park is one of our communities that is the most evolved in terms of all this. And they put together this video. It's called I Am, and it's all these residents talking about their meaningful role at the community and what brings them purpose. And there is a couple little mentions of scheduled things, but it's all about what happens in between the scheduled things on the activity calendar. And so I'll put that link in the chat. When you watch it, I want you to be aware that this isn't just people living in independent living, it's people living with all different abilities in different areas of the campus. So I'll put that in the chat there for everybody to take a look at later.
Thanks, Jill. I remember, Sally, the first time you and I met, you also told me how you just make things happen. And I always remember the questions you ask your teams. And I think, we always say that engagement or like culture starts at the top. like we said, culture is everybody's work, but you do have the setting the tone aspect. You do have the vision aspect. Do you mind sharing with the audience, like how, like say you walk into a community today and how do you make that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is I always try to be very aware that I used to do that. I didn't want anybody to know that I was the CEO when I would walk in, because I'm like, I'm the least important person, here. And I didn't want anybody to make a big deal out of it. And then when I came to visit, and I think I have some Celebration Villas people here on today. When I came to visit, the regional director that I was working with, Dave, he was like, hey, I need you to not do that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I need you. He's like, if it's up to me, I'm going to get you a sash that says Sevi, the CEO, is in your building right now. And I'm like, why would you want me to do that? Like, don't make a big deal about me. And it's because he's like, I think that it's important that the people that are coming, when you're coming to your building, because I'm not going to the building and just sitting in an office. I'm walking around and I'm thanking people for what they do. And I'm asking them two very simple questions. I'm asking them, what's something that we do really well here? And what's something we could do better? And the reason that he really wanted to make sure that people knew that it was me is because there is a misconception in our industry in particular that like people at our level, our CEO levels, that we're just too important to do those things. And for them to know, by the way, I'm not going there to like sit and spend time with just the directors. I'm there to really go and find out, what are we doing well? What could we be doing better? And I want them to know that it's from me. And I want them, and I didn't realize that that was so important because I don't put a lot of value on my title. I literally do not believe that I am the most important person there. I believe that our people that are working at the building doing this and carrying it out every day are. But where it became really important is that they knew that, one, I valued them. And I saw that somewhere in the chat earlier, somebody was like, just let your teams know, like, thank them, that you appreciate them. And that's all I want to do when I walk in there. I don't want to take time away from them. I don't want to be there to intimidate them and make them think, oh, we have to do all this because Sevi's coming into the building today. I just want to be able to meet them, thank them, and see like, what can we do better? And what are we doing well? Like that I don't want to stop doing. Simple, right?
Well, yes, it sounds simple. I'm sure it is simple, but for many people, it's hard to understand, right? Like, I think one of the key things, and just because of time, I really want to get into that now, which is, it is like when, going back to what I was explaining about Tina and the way she does it and the way Jill does it, for you three, it seems simple because you get it. There are other organizations that aren't lucky as yours, I would say. And so, when we talk to organizations, and as you might expect, like you, we talk to many organizations, very quickly, we have we can sense where they're at. Does the CEO does that? Do you have access to all of that? And many times people just don't understand what you all do, right? There's this misunderstanding about the CEO. We talked a bit about the budget and all of that. So, I mean, without asking you to describe your role, which, we've already done that. We don't want to get too much into details. I think it's something important to explain, like, how do you, what are your responsibilities and how do you make it work on your end? What matters? And, Tina, kind of jumping directly to you, because you had this one statement, which is that we don't have an unlimited piggy bank, right? Like, would you mind just walking us through this notion that ultimately you are responsible for certain things and you need to kind of balance that?
Absolutely. And I think everybody on this webinar today knows that with COVID, census has been down for the entire sector for the past 3 years, and it's rebuilding right now. So while this has always been a true statement, it's just a more true statement right now in post-COVID recovery. And I can tell you right now, most organizations have not been able to pass the costs of COVID on through private pay assessments. Government reimbursement sources have not covered the costs. The wage increase for the labor markets and the cost of inflation are all things that I have to say as a CEO, I'm not sharing with our frontline staff. I don't want them to worry about that. I want them to be focused on the resident. And so we take that as CEOs as our responsibility. This is the thing that we're doing when we're sitting at our computer and we're balancing papers. And it's just like at home when you're looking at your checkbook, the piggy bank has only got so much in it and you have to make it work. So, we'll get team members that come in with a great idea and I'll say, that's fabulous. I love that. What are we going to cut to make that work? What do you want to trade to make that work? What are you going to postpone to make that work? How are you going to make that work at low cost to no cost? What resources can we bring in that we're not using right now to hide that cost? How do we enable more people on the team to participate in a way that they haven't, which then maybe helps us save some cost? As an example, we created a fun run during COVID because our area office on aging typically has Older Americans Month citywide luncheon event that they pay for, they host, they bring everybody together and we celebrate our older Americans. Well, that all dried up during COVID. So we wound up creating a program with Link Senior as a partner. So Forest Hills a DC and Link Senior. At the time I was the chair of the nursing home community and the assisted living community in Washington, DC. So I had access to key people in terms of communications. And Charles is a very avid runner. For those of you who don't know, he'll run like 100 miles. So putting those two skill sets, again, how do you do it for cheap? And what resources that you have, what talents are on your team that you are not aware of. Have you done an inventory and skills assessment, not just within the LE, but within the entire leadership team to see what clubs they belong to, who do they hang out socially with? What are the resources that you can tap to and not hit the budget line quite so hard is something that I think about a lot. So somebody will come with a new idea and I'll be like, well, how can we creatively look to do that? So we did this fun run where it's actually on the Link Senior, I think, YouTube page, and you can see where we brought communities that voluntarily wanted together, bring them together. And we had centenarians across the city. We just finished our third year doing this. The first year we had 5 centenarians participating from different buildings, and they would hand over a baton that said, "Old people are cool." And they would hand it over to a staff person who would run it to another community. And this was all done outside to be COVID safe 3 years ago. And the looks on people, because we're in DC, a small community of providers, we kind of know each other. Healthcare workers who hadn't seen each other were running and hugging each other, and just being able to experience touch. Touch is one of the 5 love languages. We weren't touching, we were 6 feet apart. And so being able to do things in a creative way was something that was really meaningful. We involved the residents, volunteers. Last year we had Department of Epidemiology, Department of Health. We bring assisted living and skilled together where they typically have separate programming, but we were able to do that. And so it's just kind of grown every year. And you all have the abilities to emulate that within your cities as well, because we share the model of how it's done and are happy to have that. We simultaneously, without any cost, just some time, got our DC City Council to declare Old People Are Cool Month. The first, I can't say state because we're DC, but the first jurisdiction to declare all the people in the land to be cool for the month. And I have to say, we learned that from Texas because Mr. Kraft, I don't know if he's on the phone here. Edward, I don't know if he's on the line here, but he got a city in Texas to do that. And I was like, well, we can get the whole jurisdiction to do that. So let's just, we're looking at ways to be creative and to use the resources that we have. So it is something that CEOs do. Teams are encouraged to do. And I would say, we don't really share that with our LE teams, the extent to which that we are hunting for those kinds of resources. But that is the job of leadership, to help do that. And so one of the things that we're also looking at is how do we use, for those of you as skilled nursing, how do we use our CMP grants? How do we use fines that we're getting fined for? And we go back to the state and say, well, we want to increase quality by doing this kind of a life and enrichment thing. During COVID, many of us got AccuShield or other types of screening machines, to fund it out of that. So we can use ideas creatively across the cities that will allow us to improve with metrics-based outcomes what happens there within life enrichment.
Thanks, Tina. And I do want to pause and also thank you for allowing us to have the first resolutions. This is like the official paper from DC declaring, and I'm very excited for that. As you know, Link Senior, we started this initiative called Old People Are Cool, and it's been fun. And Tina, thank you so much. We all just alluded, you just alluded a little bit to cost and so on. And again, preparing this, the three of you were so big in saying that engagement doesn't have to cost something, right? Engagement can just happen. Not saying that money is not important, but you can do so much. So I know that we're a little bit pressed on time, and I do want to get into kind of the future, quote unquote, but I'd love to hear, you know, Sevi or Jill, just quick thought on that. How do you enable, just give authorization and have things that actually sometimes don't cost anything?
Jill, you want to go?
Yeah. You know, I think it's important that everybody understands that as costs escalate, as Tina said, reimbursement's not keeping up. And what I worry about in this field is senior living is becoming less accessible to people, right? Already over half the people can't afford senior living. 80% of people can't afford 4 years of assisted living. So when you're getting pressure and, you know, with leadership of your organization, like that's the rub here, right? Is we want to do the right things for everybody, and how do you keep it sustainable? So yeah, I think it's totally true that and the video I shared, the link to that, with the residents having meaningful purpose in their lives and joy and happiness and belonging and learning and growing, none of that costs any money. And I think it is everybody working together to figure out how do we, as a true community of citizens, acknowledge the situation, work together and figure things out. There's so much more than like paying an entertainer to come in and things like that, right? There's a lot that we can do and a lot of impact we can have without spending extra money. And we owe it to the residents to be good stewards of that money right now.
Well, I just want to point out, for profit, not for profit, we all have budgets, right? And even when you're talking about super high end, people are paying, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to live in a building, entry fee, you name it. Like, we all have budgets and we all have limits, and, you know, it's not just keep adding this on and adding this on. And we're all experiencing these crunches, but really where you do find the most engaged and satisfied residents usually doesn't have the biggest budgets, and they don't have the fanciest chairs, and they don't have the newest buildings. You know, it's really about that pride. I mean, I'm a blue collar kid that grew up in the Rust Belt of Ohio, and our stuff wasn't the newest or the most expensive, but it was clean and it looked nice. And you know what? We had so much fun. My fun was going to the swimming pool across the street, you know, the public pool, not my pool. We didn't have a pool. You know what I mean? So I think like those are the things that we have to think about. Like, how did the individuals that are living in our buildings grow up, and how do we find and make these individual, really just fun moments? Like, I used, when we had a building in Dayton, this sounds crazy, but the local funeral home would donate the flowers, you know, that didn't go to the cemetery, and our residents loved creating flower arrangements. And you want to know what else? Like, the flower arrangements, they went on all the tables for the dining rooms, and they went on the front desk. And if it was somebody's special day, they made something special for them. And I wasn't really able to replicate it in a lot of other buildings. It was just that one building that had this great resource that literally cost nothing and brought so much joy, like, to the people who visited and the people that were living there.
I might just throw in one sentence, which is that this fun run that we're talking about, when we talk about having virtually no budget, our budget basically was to buy t-shirts. We bought some t-shirts for the runners, and it was really just targeted towards the runners, not the whole community. And so it really was a pretty low cost event the first number of years. But that engagement was awarded the American Healthcare Association's Program of the Year. And this just goes back to prove it doesn't have to be a big budget. And I want to make sure that the LA people on here don't hear 3 CEOs going, you don't need budget. That's not the case. You do need budget.
Yes, you do.
And there's also opportunity to do some really wildly creative things without a whole lot of budget.
Yeah.
Both are good.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. You know, for me, there was one point when Sevi was talking that I was thinking about, which is that often, like, the biggest budget wouldn't be the predictor of how great the sense of community is, but there is something that usually works better in trying to predict that, is that the organization has somebody like you all three, right? That, for me, when I talk to organization, that is usually going to be a better driver than just understanding how big the budget. Now, when you work, you also have great activity directors. So I usually try to think about that relationship between your activity, like your engagement department, and you as the CEO, the leader. That usually will be a better predictor. I know we're kind of running out of time, which was kind of predictable given how great the message and your experience, but we several times during that conversation talked about the fact that we don't have money to create environments that are accessible. You know, we also talked about the fact that our product is great. You know, we do create a lot of good quality outcomes. You know, how does senior living play a role in the healthcare environment? I know that, Jill, for you and your organization, this is something, and I know you could talk about it the whole day because you have a lot of exciting things happening, but just, you know, in a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, like, paint us the picture of what's the future there for you.
So Christian Living Communities, along with two other providers, we own our own Medicare Advantage plan. And the reason for that is, you know, what I talked about with belonging, with having an age positive environment, meaningful purpose, all of the things that we provide in our communities. Senior living and all the different levels of it, independent, assisted, skilled nursing, we all play a critical role in this healthcare system in this country. Mm-hmm. And we have not had a seat at the table until this time. And so really getting into, it's called value-based care. Really, senior living, I really do think this is the future, is our communities having the opportunity to realize those cost savings, right? So if we're keeping people well, keeping people out of the hospital, that those savings can come back to our communities and be used for staff, wage adjustments, community life programs, all those kinds of things. And right now it really kind of gets siphoned out of the system by the big managed care companies. So it's a lot, and it's not in, you know, it's not in a lot of organizations' comfort zones, but it's really something we've all got to start paying attention to, is how do we have a seat at the table, because we play a important role in this country's healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing so much in so little time. And I know there's much more to that, but I think we from the activities professional standpoint, we can get very passionate about and excited about these new models. Like we've talked, and we hear more and more about this idea of the social prescription, right? This idea that things that are social based can be quote unquote prescribed, not saying that the clinical, the medical world isn't important, but just allowing that collaboration. You know, I'd like to share the fact that in February of this year, a Canadian doctor now can prescribe visits to the National Parks and Services to people that have depression, right? So instead of giving a medication for depression, giving them the opportunity to get outside. Tina, Sevi, any thoughts about that and the future there?
Tina, you want to go?
Okay, so I can tell you, this might be a new idea for our industry, but I'll share a little bit personal story, which is back in 2015, I was actually assessed for a heart attack. And I spent 3 days in the hospital being assessed. And at the end of it, became a cardiac patient for 5 years to make sure that I was okay. And I was, and everything's good. It was actually a lot of workplace stress at the time. But the cardiologist wrote on a prescription pad. He asked me all about my lifestyle. I used to teach, I'm fitness trained. I used to teach aerobics and a lot of dance and exercise background. So I said, well, I eat fairly well and I exercise. He said, but you don't have the right sense of balance. So on a prescription pad, he actually wrote, you have to do an hour a week of one of these things. And it was Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, or Qigong. And at that point, I might be Asian in like the 60th birthday party, but I didn't really spend a lot of time in any of those modalities. Although today I'm now a certified yoga teacher. at the 200 level as a result of this conversation that I had with my cardiologist. I got into it and started exploring it and wound up certified. And right now I'm working on my 500-hour focusing in mental health, because I've seen the suffering that our mental health workforce is going through. My point in saying that back in 2015, I got a prescription pad from my cardiologist that said, you need to pick an hour and do something like this once a week. It wasn't for pills. It wasn't for doctor's appointments. It wasn't for diagnostics. It was something within my control. It was something that we could do easily. What I've done to do that here in our building is I've talked to our health insurance plan, and I said, as CEO, it's going to be cheaper for you guys to support wellness. So they gave me 50 yoga mats. My problem is staffing is so short right now. And as an industry, it's hard to get staff off the floors. So my challenge right now is to figure out how to bring that wellness to the staff on the floors during their workday. So it's taking a little bit of what Charles is talking about, and I'm using it as CEO with our workforce, and our workforce is using it with residents.
Thank you so much, Tina. Sevi, any last minute thoughts about that?
I first of all, I love it. And Tina, I'm also a 200-hour yoga instructor. So who knew, Charles, you had 2 yoga instructors on your panel as well as all women. But it is really so important. And it's one of the things that keeps me up at night is how we can bring that on the daily to our individuals who are working in our communities, you know, alongside us. And it is definitely, we know loneliness is the equivalent of, you know, 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I mean, there was a real medical issue that occurred as a result of, you know, just being separated from COVID, right? And trying to find those individuals. And I think if we just I guess my last thoughts on that are, if we can all just stop trying to like solve the big puzzle and just each put one piece of the puzzle together, we can really create those little magical moments, right? They don't have to all be fireworks at the end of a Disney day. They can just be, you know, making sure that the Tabasco got put on Mrs. Smith's table before she sits down. And those are the little things, like when you're talking about the love languages, Tina, an act of kindness could be somebody's love language, right? You know, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a big expensive gift. It could be just those little things that somebody said, oh my gosh, they noticed and cared. And those little things are the ones that go a long way. And that's what all of you guys on our webinar do every single day, are these little tiny things. And everybody at our buildings are doing these little tiny things every single day. And I know sometimes it seems like it's not enough. And I know sometimes it seems like, you know, if I just had $100 more in my budget, you know, I could create more magical moments. But it's having conversations like these, Charles, and bringing these pieces to light and collaborating with, you know, none of us are competitors, right? We're all in this together, and collaborating with best practices. That's going to make everybody's experience, from our resident family member to our team members that are working alongside, a better experience together.
Thanks, Evie. You know, just closing thoughts very quickly is obviously, you know, beyond a thank you, I would just say that, like I said initially, your leadership just enables things to happen. And, you know, at the very least, whether you know it or not, and I know I will continue to have these discussions with Tina, and likely the you know, you, Jill, and you, Sevi, you know, ultimately, what you do as a CEO is that you're at least open and you try to have another CEO on the team, and that is the Chief Engagement Officer. We know that that is essential. So to your point, Sevi, about the conversations, you know, this is the future. Engagement is the future. So I just want, from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the rest of our audience as well, I just want to pause and thank you all, Tina, Jill, and Sevi, for enabling that future to happen quicker. And thank you for your time. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll speak to you very, very soon. Thank you so much.